Literally insane neighbors called the cops on us twice in the past 2 days. My girlfriend and I moved into a duplex. About 9 months ago, the neighbors that we share a wall with, a mom, 50 or 60-ish, and a son, early 30s, seemed somewhat okay. I mean, there were a couple of red flags, but we brushed them off as we were excited to move into our own place together. All the neighbors in the surrounding houses that we talked to, all have had problems with them, and nobody seemed to like them. We finally met them, and they seemed nice enough, and their only requests were, don't park in the front parking space, as the mom has cystic fibrosis, so for some reason that prevents her from walking 5 more feet from a different parking space, and to not be loud. Seemed like a pretty reasonable request, and so we've been giving them as they've asked for the past 9 months. Until 2 days ago, we haven't had a single problem with them. We just got 2 feet of heavy, wet snow dumped on us, and our power almost immediately went out. My girlfriend and I made the call to get out of there because of how cold it was and go to my mom's house. We started to back our truck out of the driveway and we got very stuck. I have a Jeep Wrangler with the winch and I winched the truck completely out of the driveway so that we could go on our way. We stayed the night at my mom's and came back the next morning to see if we had power. We came back to find my neighbor's car blocking the road and him shoveling out his parking space. Unable to pass, we parked behind him and brought our dogs inside to feed them. Once we were done feeding the dogs, I went outside to shovel out a spot for our truck to go. At this point, my neighbor finished shoveling, parked his car, and was inside. 2 vehicles pulled behind my truck there to clear off the freshly poured foundation of the new house going in across the street. Me and those guys were talking for a little bit about how crazy this storm was when my neighbor walked outside and yelled, "Y'all better move your crap out of the road because I have to leave." The construction guys asked if he had an ETA on when he was going to leave, and my neighbor responded in a very rude tone, "Whenever y'all move your crap out of the road." The construction crew had moved all their vehicles out of the roadway, but how he asked just set something off inside of me. I continued shoveling a spot for my truck to go, but a little slower than how I previously was. My neighbor came out of his house and just sat in his car, just staring at me shoveling. I finally hear his window roll down and he says, "Hey, move your truck," in a stern tone. I replied, "Hey, I'm not going to be talked to like that. You can ask nicely and I will, but as of now, my truck's staying there until I'm done shoveling so it doesn't get stuck again." I told him the world doesn't revolve around him and he needs to treat people with a little respect. He then started going off on me and cussing me out. I don't remember exactly what he said, but the things that stuck out to me were, the world does revolve around me and I deserve everything because I'm black, and I played this game with the last neighbors and they got what was coming to them. There's a reason why they moved out. I asked him if he was threatening me, and he said, "Those weren't the words that came out of my mouth." That being said, I still felt threatened by that remark. I continued shoveling, and he got on his phone and rolled up his window. Being done with the whole situation, I finished shoveling the space and I pulled my truck in. I shook my head as I passed him and went inside. Not minutes later, I look outside and I see him talking with 5 police officers outside. I went out and I sat on my porch waiting for the cops to come over and talk to me. I just saw him yelling and screaming at them and then pointing at me. I just sat quietly there, knowing his actions spoke louder than any words that I had to say. Finally, a police officer came up to me and got my side, and I told her exactly what I stated above. I did tell her that I definitely did not take the high road as I started shoveling slower as he started mouthing off to me. She gave me a look that told me that, hey, she got it. Police left, and that was that. He left as he and his mom were staying in a hotel during the power outage. My girlfriend and I went to Home Depot and we got a few Ring cameras to put outside our house as we felt threatened because his remarks earlier and wanted video proof if he did anything to our vehicles. We installed them and shortly later the power came back on. We invited a friend over to celebrate having power again, and between her car and our truck, we took up both the shoveled spots. Our truck was in their spot and our friend's car was in our spot. Keep in mind, we do not have designated spaces, and at the end of the day, it's first come, first served. Our friend left later that night, leaving a shoveled spot open for them, but our truck was still in their spot. I can't lie, I did want to leave it there just to get under their skin a little bit, but I'm done bending over backwards and accommodating our neighbors. But at the end of the day, having to park in the spot 5 feet further isn't that big of a deal for them, or so I thought. I woke up this morning to my phone going off, just saying that there was motion out front. I instantly went to the Ring app and I went into the live view so we could record everything that happens. I went to our front window to watch them, and they drive up and back right up to the truck blocking us in. I was expecting a knock on our door or a text asking us to move, but instead they got out of their car, saw me watching them in the window, and immediately went ballistic. They started yelling and screaming and flipping me off. I just pointed at the other open parking spot, mouthing, "Park there," and pointing to my freshly installed camera to show them they are on video so they don't do anything stupid. After a flurry of name-calling and cuss words, the mom started putting her hands all over our truck to brace herself even though there's a clear walking path. That's when I opened up my door and I told her not to touch the truck. She responded, "I have a disability. I need this parking space." I responded, "I don't care. It's not my problem." I know that's a jerk thing to say, but at this point, I've had enough of them. I closed the door and just let them continue yelling and screaming while I recorded their every move with the security camera. Again, I saw the son on the phone, and I knew what was about to happen. Minutes later, the police showed up, and they started freaking out to the cops, telling them that I parked in her spot. The police gave them a very confused look and came to talk to me. They said that I wasn't doing anything illegal, but just to keep the peace, they asked if I could move my truck one spot over. I said sure, and I went and I moved my truck, all while they gave me a very smug look, like they had won the battle. Little do they know, they are playing checkers while I am playing chess. I found out quite a while ago that they have not paid rent in over 4 months, and they are in the process of getting evicted. After all this happened, I downloaded all the security camera footage to my phone and sent it to the landlord. It shows every little thing that happened and everything they said. The landlord was ecstatic that I got all that footage because now she can use that in the court against them to speed up the eviction process. As of now, our landlords went to Home Depot and got a handicap parking sign and put it in their spot, even though they don't have a handicap placard. I know they won that battle, but I'm set on winning the war. Do I just leave all this be and wait for the justice system to do his magic? Continue to do petty little things to get under their skin or press charges for verbal assault? I don't want to cause them any physical pain or damage to their property. What can I do to get under their skin a little bit more? Maybe I'm the butt in this story. This says if they don't have a handicap placard for their car and they park in a marked handicap space, call the police and complain. Yeah, they're just being ridiculous. Now, cystic fibrosis is a super serious disease, but these guys are just being jerks. What do you think? How would you handle these worst HOA neighbors ever? This post is by Sensitive Ad 1896. I lived in the same HOA off and on in my 20s and early 30s. There were 3 or 4 streets and probably no more than about 60 houses in the development. It was a 0 lot line community and, of course, the very worst of the worst HOA jerks live right next door. I received handwritten complaints inside my mailbox, illegal by the way, on multiple occasions. The ones I remember were about trash cans left out for too long. I was in major depressive states on those occasions, and essentially in order to keep my dog quiet inside my own house when I wasn't even there. They would invite themselves over to my front yard to ambush me while outside with, "Your garage door doesn't need to be up right now," or "Your front shrubs need to be trimmed. This oleander should never have been planted here." On so many of these occasions, I wanted to tell this jerk where he could stick it, but he was a good 30 years older and so ridiculously entitled. I didn't have the guts, and it probably wasn't worth it. At some point, my close family member directly across the street started yelling at them as soon as they stepped foot off the road and onto the front of her property. When I left for a few years, the house sat empty while the homeowner, my family member, was in a nursing home, and then moved back. Things had escalated. Before I had left, these jerks had routinely parked a minivan in their driveway. Then their live-in, 30-something-year-old adult son got a new car and wanted it more protected, so he made some kind of deal with a woman down the street to use her garage since she didn't need the second parking spot. Fine, cool, I don't care. What I did care about was when they started complaining about cars in my driveway. This wasn't something that I did regularly, but my very close friends ended up in a legitimately unsafe situation where they lived and they came to stay with me while they figured out how to get out of their lease and move. The HOA jerk next door neighbors lost it. They tried to throw the bylaw book at me for having cars stored in the driveway. The cars were being used daily, and lots of other people parked in their own driveways consistently. At this point, I went through the bylaws with a fine-tooth comb. As it turned out, there was a rule explicitly barring one homeowner from using the garage of another homeowner. Why? I don't know or care. Of course, that was a rule that didn't need to be followed, but our driveway had to be clear, shrubs trimmed to their liking, and trash cans brought in before the garbage truck was off the street. There were a couple short cul-de-sacs in the neighborhood that ran right up to a ravine, so there was no house at the end of these streets. Apparently, these jerks didn't like that a homeowner parked his work-supplied and branded truck on the street at the end of his cul-de-sac. Their first call to complain wasn't to him, wasn't to the HOA, it was to his employer that supplied the truck. These people were ruthless and garbage humans. These are the same neighbors that complained that I didn't pick up my dog's poo in my own front yard. We didn't have any backyards at all, and almost no one had grass in their small side courtyards. They were upset that my 10-pound dog, who runs straight out to pee and straight back, wasn't on a leash because their dog was aggressive and pulling out at the same time. Because clearly, my dog being on a leash would totally fix that. Once we got a third car and parked it routinely in the driveway, they all completely lost their minds, knocking at all hours to complain while I worked enterprise sales at home, literally peeking over their courtyard wall into my kitchen, making nasty comments to my boss about me, who they went to church with, and calling my parents and other family to complain about me. These same people caused other residents to walk a certain route to avoid going past the jerk's house. It was a quiet neighborhood, so anytime someone had a party, there was a noise complaint and lots of spying on what exactly was occurring, followed by more complaints more often than not. They convinced the HOA that we shouldn't be allowed to attend HOA meetings or use the pool because our names weren't on the deed. This even though we paid all the bills, the taxes, and the HOA fees directly. Eventually, they let me in the meetings, but tried to tell me that I couldn't speak. That didn't last long. And then they tried to not allow me to vote until my father showed up to a meeting to remind them that he owned 2 properties in the neighborhood by proxy and power of attorney. My final straws were when they had their roof replaced and their roofers entered my courtyard unannounced, seeing me partially clothed in my own kitchen and then trampling my landscaping every day for a week. After that one, I was throwing roofing nails back over their wall and onto their driveway for months. They officially complained to the HOA about a small tree that wasn't trimmed to their liking, so I brought up their son's car in the neighbor's garage, and the woman who owned the said garage ended up throwing a tantrum completely with fake tears in my living room because apparently he was paying her and she needed that income. However, it was particularly satisfying when my partner told the next door neighbor that he didn't like the highly pruned style of their front yard and preferred our slightly more wild look. I swear, that man turned as bright red as a fire truck. Almost as red as when we pointed out that the neighborhood really wasn't that nice due to the enormous metal electric towers running down the middle of our street. There were islands in the road to accommodate these huge things that you could hear buzzing even from inside 24/7. About 6 months before we bought our house and got the heck out of there, I was walking my dog on a leash and she peed in another neighbor's yard on the way by. We turned to continue and I heard a voice say, "Clean up after the dog." Well, I turned around and there was no one there. This woman was yelling at me through her doorbell about non-existent dog poop. I am not proud to say that I saw red and proceeded to read her the riot act into her doorbell and pressing it repeatedly, telling her to come out. She never said another thing, never came out, and I never did see the woman ever. I never did bring up that my awful neighbors had at least 2 businesses running out of their house, strictly forbade in the bylaws, literally broke into the irrigation system controls to water their yard more on the HOA's dime, or that they had a visible water spigot and hose in their front yard. It just wasn't worth it. Perhaps this was more of a post about bad neighbors, but I will never, ever, as long as I live, own or live in an HOA again. My family is fully out of there now, and no one has anything nice to say about the place. Do you agree with these commenters? On In order to keep the dog quiet inside the own house, commenter says, I didn't need to read past this. How dare someone expect peace in their own home? OP says, you come to my door and tell me that a 10-pound dog behind the brick walls of my house is disturbing you from inside your bricked house, and I'm going to laugh while I slam the door in your face. Comment says, can we not compare everyone we don't like to that group? That's super messed up and insensitive. Frankly, you both sound insufferable. What'd you think of this story? Sued HOA Karen for towing my project car off my driveway. I live in a quiet town. Aside from a loudmouth know-it-all HOA Karen, she's a woman known for her relentless pursuit of what she considered neighborhood perfection. She has about as much grace as a baby deer who still has the wobbles in his legs. We affectionately called her HOA Karen, and she had a knack for scrutinizing every lawn, every flower bed, and, unfortunately for me, every parked car. My project car, a rusty yet hopeful relic of my automotive dreams, had found its temporary home in my driveway. It wasn't pretty, and it certainly wasn't functional at that moment, but it was my passion project. However, HOA Karen had other ideas. So one sunny Saturday morning, I was woken up by the grating sound of a tow truck pulling up to my driveway. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and I stumbled over to my window, only to witness HOA Karen herself directing the tow truck driver to hitch up my beloved project car. It was a real surreal sight, a suburban showdown over in broad daylight. So I rushed outside in my pajamas. I'm desperately trying to reason with Karen. And I'm like, what on earth are you doing, Karen? You just can't tow my car. So with a haughty expression, she replied, it's an eyesore, dear. We can't have this junk ruining the aesthetic of our lovely neighborhood. Before I could protest further, my project car was hoisted onto the tow truck and off it went, leaving me standing in disbelief on my own driveway. I knew that I had to take a stand, so I decided to take HOA Karen to court. The legal battle that ensued was anything but pleasant. Karen, true to form, tried to paint me as the neighborhood troublemaker, claiming that I was lowering property values with my unsightly car. But I had evidence. Photos of my car in its designated spot, witnesses who attested to its temporary nature, and a history of neighborhood disputes involving Karen. As the case unfolded in court, it became apparent that Karen's obsession with neighborhood aesthetics was more of a personal vendetta than a general concern for property values. The judge saw through this facade, and after a tense legal skirmish, I emerged victorious. Karen offered to pay damages for the wrongful towing and was prohibited from interfering with my property in the future. The victory was sweet, but the aftermath was even sweeter. HOA Karen, now nursing her wounded pride, avoided eye contact whenever she passed by my house. Gone were the judgmental glances and disapproving frowns. The once overbearing presence of HOA Karen was reduced to a mere shadow, and my project car, now back in its rightful place, became a symbol of triumph. The neighborhood, witnessing Karen's defeat in court, began to question her self-appointed role as the arbiter of aesthetic standards. The community, it seemed, had grown tired of her domineering ways. Slowly but surely, other residents began asserting their right to express themselves through their home and their possessions. As for me, I continued working on my project car, now with a renewed sense of pride and vindication. The victory in court was not just about a car, it was about standing up to unreasonable authority and defending the right to pursue one's passions, no matter how unconventional they may be. Our neighborhood learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes it takes a rusty car and a determined owner to remind a community that diversity, even in the form of a slightly dilapidated project car, is what makes a neighborhood truly vibrant. And so life continued with a little less interference from HOA Karen and a little more acceptance of individuality. I'm thinking she had like a power trip going on here, because she could have just said, hey, I don't like your car, but instead she went an illegal extra mile and thinking that that would just do it, but it didn't. I mean, come on, if you stand up to her, it's only going to take a second to realize she's a farce. What would have you done? I'm getting deployed and my landlord told me that I can't break my lease. I've lived at this property for close to a year now. I came down on orders for the AFR for 9 months, and as soon as I found out, I informed my landlord via text and email that I would be sending him a notice of intent to vacate and a copy of my orders via certified mail. After sending it, I sent him a picture of the tracking receipt. He responded telling me, "We're on his time now and he'll get to it when he gets to it." USPS went by his house and no one was there to sign for the package. He waited over 20 days until it was the last day it was returned to sender to go to the post office and pick it up. One day, before my final month in the apartment, he tells me I cannot break the lease with the items I provided him. I again explained to him under the Service Member Civil Relief Act that it's considered a misdemeanor in the United States to deny a service member to break his lease if on orders for more than 30 days. He didn't respond and didn't seem like he gave a crap. I originally wanted to be nice to him and just have a seamless transition out of the apartment. He didn't want to let that happen, and he sent me an invoice for $1,500 for 3 dog wastes that he found in the back of the yard. Mind you, I paid a non-refundable pet deposit that's supposed to be used for situations like this upon discovery during final inspection. At this point, I was done with his crap. When I moved into the apartment, I paid first, last, and a security deposit. In the state that I live in, it is regulation for the landlord to provide the tenant with relevant banking information on where your security deposit is being held, and you should accrue interest in that account throughout the year. He never provided me that information, and it was never included in the generic contract that he gave me. I'm in contact with 2 lawyers, one for my military issue and a civilian one for the security deposit issue. If he does not allow me to break my lease, the prosecutor from the DOJ is going to be calling him. My civilian lawyer sent him certified mail demanding the security deposit back, otherwise it'll go to litigation and I'll receive 3 times the security deposit plus all the court fees from him. He never signed for that package as well, so we had to send him a package through FedEx with no signature required, but they took a picture of it at his door. I've got nothing but radio silence from my landlord. Is there anything else I can do at this point? Has anyone else experienced something similar? This comment lays the law down. Contact your JAG, do what they say. Yeah, if he is literally breaking the law when it comes to military, they ain't gonna take that lightly. So landlord, you better shape up or you're gonna get laid out, man. What would you do? HOA board member arrested. So our HOA is a little bit shady and has been for as long as I've lived here. The board members seem to have it in for certain homeowners and will do anything they can to harass them. One HOA board member made a habit of sitting outside the homeowner's house for hours, just looking for violations to write them up and then fine them for. We had a guy trespass in our backyard, scared my daughter so badly, but didn't have him on video, so I couldn't do anything. What the board member didn't realize is they had a camera trained on him the whole time, including when the kids were playing outside in the front yard. The homeowner turned the recordings over to the police, and the board member was arrested for felony stalking last week. Suddenly, there are not 1, but 3 openings on the board, and new elections are scheduled for next month. I'm just saying thank you, cameras, for having the proof that we need. Holy cow, what a story. Sue my HOA. Lawsuit for $50,000. Your Honor, destroy this HOA. Click the video on your screen to find out what happens to that nasty HOA, and I'll see you there.